Okay, so easy. Okay. You'll get the answers back next Wednesday. And as I said, I'll take the 2 of the best grades you have for 3 of the top quizzes. So if you miss one, then I'll just take the 2 you did. I received some drafts for the final paper from some people, and I returned it to you. Has anybody sent me a draft and has not received the corrections or grade? Okay. So you can, from now to the 17th, you can send me a first draft if you're interested in getting feedback. I was quite impressed. It was well done by the ones that I saw. Once again, or in many of them, I commented that you should have more citation. I mean, most of the articles were well researched, I think, but they just had the citation at the very end, or very few times. Clearly, there are places in which you had borrowed from some other author's arguments or data. You couldn't have come up with all these ideas yourself. So wherever you, not just direct quotes, but whatever idea or argument, try and put it in text citation. Okay? 문주の中にソースを入れてください. Okay, so good. We have basically 2 more classes. 18th, depending on how many people come, I might not do a class, I might not do a class. So we have, as you can tell, I'm very sick, so I'll try and make it quick. Today's class is going to be about women in the workplace, womenomics, and this question about gender equality. Not the whole broad, it's a very big topic. You can have many classes on this, but just focusing mainly on women's role in the workplace and also their role in the political sphere. And oftentimes you may have heard Japan often comes very low in terms of global ranking of how women participate in the economy and also in politics. We'll talk about why this is the case and what can be done to improve it. Okay. So that's the topic today. And then next week we'll talk about the supposed rightward shift of Japan in terms of ideology. Get the lights. Okay. So start out with some figures. This is the so-called World Economic Forum report on global gender gap. And it measures various indicators of the difference between men and women in the same country. And it's controlled for levels of development. So you get the gap in terms of educational attainment, the gap in terms of amount of health levels and survival levels between men and women. Of course, in terms of employment condition and salaries, the gap between average salaries of men and women for the same job. And I think the last one was political equality. So how represented women are in parties and in politics and ministerial positions. And it's quite shocking. Japan is 102nd out of 142 in 2014. It slipped to 111 out of about 140 countries. So quite poor in terms of the measurements that they use to see whether men and women have equal chance to participate and equal opportunities in society. Sweden, Norway, Finland, New Zealand, Philippines, Germany, Britain. These are all top 10. Cuba is 22, interestingly. The United States is quite low, 31. China, 73. Italy, 84. Japan, 91. This is 2007, so it's a bit old. And then you have Turkey, Pakistan, Yemen. By the way, who's this? She's no longer around, but does anybody remember her? She's not very famous. Helen Clark, she's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. So there are a number of heads of state that are women now. Anybody care to mention a few? Famous heads of state.
Angela Merkel?
Angela Merkel, yes. She's not just the head of the state, she's like the leader of the free world. So She's the only beacon of light to stop the end of the world, almost. Exaggerating. But she's impressive, Angela Merkel. Nuclear physicist? Chemist? Amazing. Okay, who else? Women leaders in the world. In Asia?
Taiwan.
Yeah, anybody from Taiwan here? Ex-president. Park Geun-hye. Yeah, she was not very successful. Current president of Taiwan is Tsai Ing-wen. Very impressive figure too. Who else in the world? Angela Merkel, Tsai Ing-wen. Theresa May, yes. Who's Theresa May? She's the Prime Minister of Britain. I don't know for how long. She's in a lot of trouble now, but of course Margaret Thatcher. A while back. The Brazilian president, Dilma Rousseff, no longer. Maybe she's changed, but for a while it was this female president. And in Argentina, right? Kirchner. So quite a few, and then in different countries. Iceland has a female president. So it's moving on. Japan, will there be a prime minister who's female? Maybe. Who knows? We have a number of governors, as you know, in Tokyo. This is Koike. But these are, of course, these are not necessarily representative of the total or the average amount of representation, and I'll show later on that in Japan. Although you have some famous female politicians, on average, the percentage of women in politics is very low. Here are some indicators, not just in politics, but generally, in terms of inequality between men and women. Well, here we go, politics, since I'm most interested in politics. The number of men to women, women to men ratio for legislators, that's that members, is 12%. So there's only 12% of female politicians compared to male politicians. It's another ranking. Senior officials and managers, I guess top management jobs, quite low. The number of people, this is the gap. This is the sort of the number of women working as in the workforce. That was 63% on average. Technical and professional workers, 87%. 60% for estimated earned income, 68% for wage equality for similar work. And professors, maybe you've noticed being in Kyoto University, but the number of female professors, very few. Depends on the faculty. Only 14% of professors in Japan in general are women, and 18% of lawyers. So, of course, depending on where you're from, it might be higher or lower, but I think generally it should be higher. Japan has quite low levels of female professors. Okay. Here's one of the more important figures or statistics that people point to. This is the pay gap, gender pay gap. That is a difference in terms of income earned for similar kind of work between men and women. Gender gap exists in everywhere, not just Japan. It exists in Sweden, UK, America, Germany, but in Japan it's particularly bad. That women who work similar kind of jobs, similar positions, they get less than 70% of what men are. In terms of the number of female managers for companies, Japan is about 10%, where compared to Sweden, 30%. UK, Germany, America, all above 30%. So in terms of management positions in companies, important positions in companies, women are very poorly represented. When it comes to very high level management, so top level management, chairman, board members and such, it's only 1% female representation. Compared to China and Singapore, other Asian countries, actually gender equality and workforce participation seems to be better in these countries compared to Japan. Why? What's going on? Well, they tried to change. I mean, there's been a history of trying to implement laws to encourage women to get go into the workforce and to be treated fairly and equally. In the textbook, we talk about it a little bit, and that's some of the articles I sent you. In 1985, they had this law called the Equal Employment Opportunity Law. And this was aimed to make it easier for companies to hire women and keep them. But what happened was it created this two-track system. Two tracks, that is, one track you are in this called Soboshoku, which is a managerial track. And if you enter this position, if you get hired on this track, it means that you get a lot of responsibility, you get transferred, you get training, you move around. It's very important that you stick around. It's very difficult to leave halfway, or you have to listen to the company and say, okay, well, the company wants you to go here to another city, then you have to go. And then Ippanshoku, which was basically less responsibility and eventually less salary, I guess, to a clerical work where you stay in one area, one location. Most big companies in Japan, they have positions all across Japan, or even outside. And what happened was men tended to be hired as Soboshoku, and women tended to be hired as Ippanshoku. So this sort of, and partly it was that women chose Ippanshoku because they knew that they couldn't accede, they couldn't accept having to move around, especially if they want to have a family. It's more difficult for women to, with family, to move from one position to another in geographically. That's one of the reasons. That's one challenge. What other things make it difficult for women to stay on working in companies? Overtime culture. What's overtime? Overtime is zangyo. So this culture and norm or standard that people work very late, and they, for various reasons, it's accepted or even encouraged to stay really late. And of course, men do it, and if you don't stay late, things are changing and depending on the company, but if you don't stay late, it suggests that the employee is not serious or committed to the company enough. This makes it very difficult to have a balance between your work and your home life, especially if you have small children. You have to get home by 5, 6 o'clock, or even earlier. You have to take care of children. But if there's an overtime culture where you're expected to work late, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, you can't have kids. Somebody has to take care of the kids. If you have grandparents, okay. But even still, so it's too much work and inefficient working practices make it very difficult. Has always been discussed this problem of rigidity in hiring practices and in terms of promotion. That once you join the company, you have to stay with the company. It's hard to move around with sort of skills that you can transfer. There's lack of flexibility in taking career breaks or leaving to raise your kids for 3 years and coming back. It's very difficult to do that. It's probably not so easy to do it outside of Japan, but in Japan especially, there are not the kind of support for allowing you to quit a job and come back. Women, I think the figures come out later, but 70% of women quit when they have babies in Japan for up to 10 years. They return to the workplace, but they return to posts that are much less high-skilled work. They go into part-time or they go into work that doesn't require so much responsibility. So they lose a lot of opportunities. Because companies don't want to hire after 5 years and 10 years. Promotion based on tenure length, not productivity and performance, with a similar kind of argument. It's very difficult to move around companies. Management in the companies don't know how to measure the value of an employee to the company very well. So it's very difficult to measure. So they base it on how many years you've been there, how long you've been working. This, of course, disadvantages women because it's usually women who take time off when they have children. So they don't go back. When they do go back, they just go back to part-time positions. And so we have seen, we talked about it a little bit last week, but there's been an increase in employment, non-regular employment. And the greatest contributor to this surge of irregular labor in Japan is women. more and more women are joining into the workforce, but they're entering into the workforce as irregular workers, not regular, not full-time contract, part-time contract work. So here, 70% of Japanese women give up work after the first child because working hours make childcare unfeasible. They return to work, I don't know, after 10 years or so, 5 to 10 years. I think about half of them return to work, half of them just quit altogether. But as I said, they don't go back to their old job, they go back to some lower paid, less skilled job, which is a real waste. Because among indicators that Japan does very well in terms of gender inequality is women are very well educated in Japan. The Japanese government, parents invest a lot in educating women. So you have a very, very valuable resource, highly educated, motivated, capable women. But because the system, the workplace system, doesn't capitalize or use this talent, they end up working in jobs that they are overqualified for. Their full capacity is not used. Work-life imbalance, so-called. There are other reasons one could argue it makes it difficult for women to balance life, work and career, work and family. Men are the biggest problem, probably one of the biggest problems. They are also working crazy hours. They don't come home, and there's an assumption that they don't have to help out at home. I think it's changing a little bit, especially for double income families with two parents working. But it has been that when you look at the statistics of how many hours men put into helping out non-paid work at home, it's very, very low compared to, say, countries like even China or Sweden, Denmark, even USA. And of course, in terms of institutional support, well, if you have to work late, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and you have small children, you have to be able to put them into a nursery.幼稚園only goes up to 2 or 3 p.m. And there's a shortage, a real problem, shortage of nurseries in major cities. They're trying to improve that, but it hasn't really helped. And of course, most parents don't want to put children into nurseries until 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock. If you have a 3-year-old child or a 4-year-old, you don't want them to be in nursery from 8 to 8 in the morning to 8 at night. You want to be able to take them out at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. But because Japanese working hours don't do that, working hours are so long, it's not feasible. So, I don't know, from my own personal experience, in Sweden, my sister has children. Both of them are working, her husband. But one of them leave the job at 4 o'clock or 3:30 to pick up the children. So it's feasible. But if both parents are working until 8 p.m. every day, they pick up their kids from the hoikan at 8 p.m., which happens. One starts worrying about the child. So then what happens is, I guess the mother will quit until the child becomes 6 years old or 7, 8 years old. She'll quit, take care of the child. Very wrong. And another one, which perhaps was mentioned in the readings, is this problem of, not a problem, but in other countries you have babysitters and nannies. Singapore, for example, or even Taiwan, where else they have lots of nannies. In Asian countries, in Indonesia, maybe Malaysia, you have nannies. What are nannies? Nannies are babysitters, people who live in and take care of the children. If you have that, it's much easier. The mother can work full time because they don't have to worry about the kids. Is this a good thing for the development of the children? I don't know. Is it a good thing is it fair that a nanny who has maybe their own children taking care of other rich people's children all the time, sacrificing their own child? Probably not. But in Japan, it's very, very difficult to hire in-house servants or nannies. They're trying to change that. Abe government has been talking about the need to encourage this kind of babysitting and nannying. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's also culturally looked down upon to use outside help to raise your own children. Mothers are supposed to take care of their children. That's their duty, that's their job until they're 5 or 6. And if the child becomes messed up or strange or weird, then it's all the mother's fault. This is very unfair. Okay. These are some figures. work participation rate, female labor participation rate. Sweden is 80%. This red line is the participation rate. And the blue line talks about how many unpaid work do you do per day. What's unpaid work? What sort of thing is unpaid work?
House chores.
House chores like washing dishes, taking out the garbage, buying groceries. What else? Vacuum cleaning, changing diapers. Do any of you do that? No. I guess all of you are still students. See, in Europe, students, they're adult students, they have children or married or whatever. In Japan, most students are students. They don't have. Anyhow, so if you see this, you see that the participation rate is somewhat correlated to how many hours people work. Well, not really, but Japan, clearly, men don't put in time, unpaid work to do household chores. Why? Well, partly because I think it's a chicken and the egg. If the mother or if the wife is at home, she's a single shifu, then the husband, why should he help out, right? I mean, he's working all the time, crazy hours, taking the commute. Why does he have to come home and work? So then the job falls on the woman, on the full-time housewife. Well, it's a kind of chicken and egg. Because men don't help out, because women are expected to do this, then women have a difficult time staying in the workforce, possibly. You can see it from 1970 to 2005, female participation, labor participation rate has actually gone up in most countries. Look here, Netherlands used to be housewife central in the 1970s. Almost 70% of married women in Netherlands were housewives in 1970, but now it's only 40%. Sweden, it's only 60%. It must be higher. I don't. Sometimes the statistics have different numbers, which is not good. I should check why they have different numbers. But anyhow, you get the comparative sense. Japan has also has been flat actually in terms of female participation rate. Whereas other countries have been increasing considerably. There are various reasons for this. Obviously, one of the main reasons is women are getting better educated, and they have more opportunities to work in a modern economy. You have service sector jobs, you have industry jobs. So it doesn't make a difference if you're a man or woman. In 100, 200 years ago, there were certain jobs that women couldn't really do, or it was more advantage for men to do because of physical size. But now there isn't any kind of disadvantage for being a woman in terms of getting a job in a modern economy. Most jobs, anyway. So increased. And then, of course, many of these countries introduced free childcare, or introduced universal childcare, introduced all these kind of mechanisms that allows women to balance work and career, or couples to balance work and career. Japan's trying to get there too. It's looking at other countries, especially countries with relatively high growth rates. I guess Sweden, Canada, UK, Germany, and saying Japan. The reason why Japan's economy is not doing so well is partly because women are not participating. We're wasting this amazing capital, human capital, highly educated, ambitious, capable workers who are quitting because they can't balance work and career. In 2000, basic law of gender equality, basic law of gender equality, 男女共同参画社会なんとか法. And there's all kinds of targets set to increase women in workplace, in politics. Koizumi, for example, says in 2003 we're going to have 30% of women in managerial positions, 30% of women in political representation, so DAI members. That's very ambitious. Still, this target exists. And of course, it's not just the... Of course, as Japan's economy slows, the last decades, politicians are looking for various ways to boost the economy. They say, well, women, all these underutilized women, maybe several million new people in the workplace that will improve Japan's productivity, competitiveness. So, some business and political leaders felt that increasing women participation will help the economy. It's a boom, womenomics. And Abe has picked up on this womenomics, and he's been trying to sell this, although the actual results are very limited. He has said things like women are the most underused resource in Japan, and he wants to make a society where all women can shine. What that means. Some calculations: raising the female labor participation rate to male levels in Japan could add 8 million people to the workforce and increase GDP by 15%. That's huge. So, business interests are very keen on this. Politicians are keen on it. Although there is, of course, conservative elements in the LDP who say, no, this is not such a good idea. Women should traditionally be at home, take care of the children. So it's not everybody's on board. But the fact that Abe, who's supposed to be super conservative, heading the LDP, has pushed on this idea of womenomics, suggests things are changing, and suggests that the situation is so bad in terms of Japan's demographics and workforce, lack of labor, that they have to use women. Not necessarily to make women happy, although of course they say it's for a society where women can shine, but it's essentially so that Japan's economy can continue growing. And also there is this interesting trend in countries where women participate more in the labor force, the fertility rate, the number of babies being born are higher. So you think this is strange. If women join the workforce, they'll be busy working, they won't have time for kids. But in wealthier countries, you're seeing a correlation with high female participation rate and higher fertility. I'll show you some statistics. Most developed economies until the 2000s or 90s have seen birth rates fall. Average number of babies being born women fall as women enter workforce. Improved medical care, less dependence on children for housework, rising cost of raising children, lifestyle choices, women's increased education and earning power leads to female entrance into the workplace and shrinking families. Okay? We talked about this yesterday a little bit, why families aren't making as many children as they used to. But recently, countries with high female work participation rates, Nordic countries, so Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Australia, have relatively higher fertility rates with high female labor participation. In countries like South Korea, Spain, and Italy, and Japan, they have both low female participation rates and labor participation rates and low birth rates. So what is happening? Well, I think those who are not working, say the 40%, 50% that are not working, they're housewives, so they generally have children. But in Japan, if you are working, then you've chosen to work, and that's the only thing that most of them don't have children, or don't get married, most likely. Whereas in the other countries, it's possible to balance having work and a family, primarily because there's state support. State support meaning there is infrastructure, free and universal, accessible childcare, nurseries, maternity leave, men's maternity leave, paternity leave, which means the man can take vacation when the baby's born. All kinds of support systems and laws and regulations that help balance. Whereas in Japan, it's there, but it's weak, and it's weakly enforced. So it's very difficult to balance both. You have to have you have to be blessed with good how should I say, conditions. Maybe you have grandparents nearby, maybe you're really determined, or the husband is very well, has a very good job, so you can hire all kinds of help. Okay. But what are people's attitudes? We've talked about how it's difficult to have balanced life and career for women and also for men. But what do they think? What do they really want? Well, in 1987, about 40% of single men wished their future wives to be full-time homemakers. So sengyoshu. So 40% wanted their wives to be sengyoshu. This has fallen to 11%. Over the same period, the ratio of men who hoped that their partners would continue their career rose from 11 to 33%. So what's this saying is that men don't necessarily want women to stay at home. And actually, they want their partners to continue their work to some degree. So there's a change in attitude. Although, some surveys suggest this progressive attitude. Actually, there's a lot more conservatism as well. This is a statistic, this is a question asking, 夫は外で働き、妻は家庭を守るべきであるという考え方です。賛成の割合。So, they asked, do you agree men should go out and work and women should stay home and protect the family? And you can see from 2000 to 2014, those who agree, this is all age groups, right? All age groups. So, the women who agree with this idea that women should stay home is lower than men. About 40% to 48%. Some as low as 37%. And men a bit higher. It goes up in 2012, this idea of traditional family, that men should go and work, women should stay home. Why do you think this attitude changed in 2012? This conservative sense of a family where mothers stay home and men go out. Suddenly it goes up in 2012. What happened? What do you think might have happened? What happened before 2012? 1 year before 2012. There's an earthquake in Tohoku, a national disaster crisis. So they say after the crisis, people became more family-oriented and home-oriented, and more the marriages increased. The sense of protecting your family from outside dangers and risks, maybe. Anyhow, so it's quite surprising, about 40%. And if you look at by age group, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, of course, those who are in their 60s and 70s, they're very traditional. About 50, 60%, 55% would agree that women should stay at home. It's the 40s and 50s that are the most, how should I say, feminist, or believe that women should, women and men should have equal role. If you look at the younger generation, 20s and 30s, they're actually more conservative. About 40% of women in 20s and 30s, at least in 2014, agreed they should stay home. Or agreed with the statement that it's the role of women to stay home and protect the family. So this is quite shocking. When I showed this to my class last year, there were some people from France or some women, they're like, really? Is it not shocking? Maybe not. I'm sure there is this kind of notion of traditional family. It's called the male breadwinner model. It exists outside of Japan as well. To this extent, it's quite surprising. You should find some comparative numbers. Okay. And what we're seeing is because there's this notion that men should be out, women should, it's not a majority, but it exists out there. The people who are getting married, unmarried rates by age is increasing for all age groups. This is from 1920 to 2010 for men and for women. This is 25 to 29, 30 to 34, and age 50. And what percent of people are unmarried? In the 1920s, if you're 50, 98% of you, 50 or above, 98% of you will be married. There'll be very few people who are unmarried. It's increasing, right? There are almost 20% of people who don't get married at all in their life now. In between 30 and 40, there's about 50% of people don't get married. At least now, 2010. And 25 to 29, 70% of people don't get married. So marriage is getting later and later. This also, of course, has effect on fertility rates as well. If you start making babies at a later age, you can't have as many babies. And of course, men tend to get married a bit later than women. But for all age groups, marriage is getting delayed. But this is the reality. This is what's happening. People are getting married later, and some are not getting married at all. But the percentage, if you ask people on an annual survey, do you want to get married? Do you want to have a family? The percentage of people who say, yes, I want to get married, I want to have a family, stays relatively consistent. This goal, this norm, doesn't change. So what's happening? Well, it's getting more difficult to get married. It's getting very difficult to create a conventional family. Okay? Partly because of economic conditions. Young people cannot get regular jobs, or the work they have, they feel like it's not enough in terms of salary to support a whole family. So an increasing number of young people and older people have not entered into wedlock, have not married, despite their desire to do so. So the main reason behind the fall in Japan's fertility rate, this is from Gordon's article, is that people want to get married, they want to have children, but they can't for whatever reason. It's not all. I think there are probably an increasing number of people who are postmodern who think that we don't want to have family, we don't need family. But the majority. Jump around a bit, but how about women's ideal future life goals? So you just look at women. What do you want to do? What's your ideal? And this is from 1987 to 2010. The red one is full-time homemaker, single shift. Obviously, it was about 30%. It's come down about 20%. So compared with this 40% who say that, oh, women should stay home, statistics don't mesh very well. But the fact is, fewer and fewer people really want to just stay home. Return to work after child raising is the highest. And then balance career and family, whatever that means, continue to work, right? Dual income, no kids, and remain single and continue working has always been very low. The point being, most people want to have some kind of balance between family and career, or at least have some kind of. Those who say, no, I want to stay single all my life, or those who say, I just want to have a couple partner, income, and no kids, actually quite low. So, view of family is quite conservative, unchanged. Or the goal, the desire to have family. The problem is, even if you do want to have a family, there's a gap between what you expect your partner to be and what they actually are. That is a gap in their ability, their economic power. Expectations of annual income for potential marriage partners. How much money do you expect your future husband or wife to make every year? The blue is men and the red is women. This is 2 million, 4 million, 6 million, 8 million. Not important. About 60% of men don't care about the future wife's salary. That's nice. Well, kind of nice. About 20% of women don't care about the partner or future husband's salary. It's nice. The reality is about 34%, 22%. About 56, 57% of women expect their husbands to make more than 4 million, 6 million. Some women expect them to make over 8 million, 7%. Okay. Men are less concerned about how much money the wife makes, future wife makes. So this is the expectation. What's the reality? Actual annual income of unmarried men. Less than 2 million is 38.6%. Over 2 million, 36.3%. Over 4 million, 20%. And over 6 million. So, most of those men who are still not married have relatively low salaries. Well, it could be, they didn't get married because they had low salaries, so the pool of unmarried men, lower salaries. So, this gap. So it's very difficult. So a lot of women are choosing not to get married because they cannot find their partner at the right income level. It's kind of sad, but this must happen. some effect on marriage rates. So there's a nikyoka or polarization of those who can make families, conventional families, and those who can't. On one side of this gap are those who succeed in creating conventional family. Other side of those who have not succeeded in remaining unmarried. The division of young people into two groups is one of the key features of the Japanese family today. So not all young people can get married and have conventional families because of this economic reality. This is just some more data of number of people who are unmarried and living with their parents. Number of unmarried adults aged 35 to 44 living with their parents. It's quite shocking. About 10 million people in their ages between 20 to 34 live with their parents. And about 3-4 million people live with their parents aged 35 to 44 unmarried. So what are these people going to do? Well, they're going to live like this. They're not going to have families. Population is going to shrink. This has never been like this, traditional society. It's a new phenomenon, a new kind of cohort of people. It's rather interesting dynamic. The reality, as I said, is that it's not a lifestyle choice. Most of these people would like to get married, but they can't. Okay, let me see where we are. Right. Well, what kind of solutions sort of jumped around in terms of data on marriages and data on women participation? They reflect. What can be done? Well, as I said, I haven't shown you the statistic, but a majority of couples in surveys, they say they would like to have at least around two children. Around two children. Okay? So what can be done? Well, probably the biggest thing that can be done is for Japanese to work less. Work much, much less. And be much more efficient. As I was explaining to you this anecdote, if you can go home from work at 4 o'clock, go to work at 8, finish at 4 or 5, life is completely different if you have to leave work at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., which tends to be the case for a lot of salary workers. And if both men and women can do it, they have much, much more time to not just take care of their children, but family life, which is vital. If you don't have that, it's very difficult to maintain a healthy kind of relationship. You need to have, of course, much more institutional support, clearly. Not just changing work style, but also to provide support, state support for child care, and also for old people's care. Old people's care actually connects to women and men, women having a balanced life and work career, right? Family and career balance. Why? Well, because in Japan, who takes care of the father-in-law, mother-in-law, elderly? It tends to fall on the housewife. It tends to fall on women. Men are not really expected to take care of their old elderly relatives. So this is a double, this is kind of very, very difficult to continue working and also take care of children and also take care of the elderly. So if you have much more systematic state support for taking care of the elderly, frees up time for women who are expected to take care of the elderly, to focus on their work and also to focus on raising children. Paternity, paternity leave, increased child care benefits, so reduce taxes for people who have babies. I don't know. In France, anybody from France? They have very, very generous benefits for families with many children in terms of reduced tax.
But like in Japan, at least I know there's some tax, decrease when they get married instead of living together.
Yeah.
But they don't have.
They have a thing called 児童手当, not 子供手当. So you get per child, regardless of your income, like 1,300? Can't remember. It's quite small. And then if you're married and your wife doesn't make more than 1 million yen annually, or 1.03 million yen, then you can get the tax deduction, well, 380,000 yen. So this is one reason why this encourages women not to work. If you're going to get a tax cut, tax cut of 380,000 yen seems to be small, but for some families it's probably big. They choose not to work. And if you have a salary less than 1.3 million yen, you get free national pension scheme without paying premiums. They're trying to change this law so that you don't get tax deductions as a family unit, even if the mother doesn't work or the wife doesn't work. But compare with other countries in terms of the tax benefits you can get or support for raising children, it's very limited. And there are all these hidden costs if you raise kids in Japan. You have to pay actually just to send them to elementary school, to pay for their lunch fees, to send them to nursery. You have to pay all these costs. Of course, depending on the country, they're higher. In the UK, for example, has extremely high childcare costs, and US as well. But if you look at countries like France or Sweden or Denmark, where fertility rates are high and labor participation is high, these things are much, much more well supported. And it doesn't cost so much money to have children because the state supports. You need to do that in Japan as well. Increase paternity leave, maternity leave. There's a law in terms of if you have a baby, you can take 6 months off from work or 9 months off from work. But most fathers don't take the full time. Okay? It's like vacations in Japan. There are vacations, but people don't take them. So that's the problem. Because there's a norm within the companies that you shouldn't take. Gender quotas. Gender quota is, let's say you have a board of directors, half of them have to be women. Or if you have public sector, if you're in the Ministry of Finance, at least half of them have to be women when you hire. You could do that. You change the law. This is affirmative action, so people will say, well, you will hire women that are not as capable as men. But maybe drastic action is required if you want to balance. Change of public attitudes and also, and this is more difficult. I don't know how you do that. How does the government change people's attitudes? Is it a good thing that government's trying to change people's attitudes or norms? It's tricky, but attitudes have to change. Okay, so finally we go on a little bit to focus on politics, which we haven't really talked about. Japan, as I said, ranks very low in terms of the ratio of female representatives, of female politicians. 8.1% in the lower house, 18.6% in the upper house. This is 2012. 2006, Japan set out the goal to have women account for 30% of all. 2003, they aim for 30%, but Japan is far from it. 10-12% of female representation. So much lower than, say, Rwanda, for some reason, has very high level of female participation. Canada, recently, the Trudeau government, his cabinet, half of them were women, or more than half were women. Okay, what's the problem? Well, there are various reasons why it's so difficult for women to get into politics. I think one big reason is that Japan has a system of elections that focus on individual candidates, single member districts, the national level, and at local level it's this multi-member districts. Anyway, the idea is that it's not about the party so much as the individual. This means you have to spend a lot of money, you have to have lots of contacts, social contacts, you have donations and funding from parties. And it's difficult. Women are disadvantaged in terms of having those kind of contacts, of having that kind of money to get the party to back them, especially if the parties are conservative. Like the Communist Party or Komeito, they tend to have equal number of women candidates to men candidates. But the big parties, LDP and Progressive, Minshinto, they tend to not back women as much. There's also no gender quota. That is, In all European countries, European parties with proportional representation, people vote based on the party, and the party provides a list of candidates, right? And however many votes the party gets, the number of seats are shared out, and then you choose from the list of candidates. If you have that list, then the party can have man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman. So half the candidates are women. You can have a kind of party gender quota, which was in your quiz today. But they don't have that in Japan. Okay? And I guess there's a debate on whether a government should legislate how a party chooses candidates. In some countries, it's in the law. But they could do that. Of course, politics is unattractive. It's an unattractive job for men, but even more unattractive for women. Why is it unattractive? Well, the insecurity of the job, the threat, the stress. Election day, you lose everything if you lose. Job security is very low. And people don't respect politicians. But there's a lot of discrimination, casual sexism and discrimination towards women. So why would you want to go in? If you're a talented woman and you're educated and you're capable, what you do is you work for a foreign company or you leave Japan. I've had experiences taking the airplane from Europe, from Germany or from Sweden. Sitting next to me is a Japanese woman, relatively young. I tend to chat up young women. No, I don't do that. She was sitting there, we were chatting, and she said, she was working for a Japanese company, and she quit because she can't stand the sexism or the bamboo ceiling. So she's very happy working in Germany. So if you have that, talented people will leave. You either stay loyal to the company, or you complain and take over, or you quit. Quitting is easiest. And now it's a global economy. A lot of talented people working in foreign companies are leaving. Kind of women. It's men too. So this is why would you want to go into politics? Especially when there are very few or limited number of role model women. There are very few role models. If you want to join, if you want to start something, if you know somebody who's doing it already and successful, you want to do it. But there are few role models. Well, there's some. Koike-san, Nobuseiko, Renko, who else? Inada Komomi, I don't know if she's successful, but there aren't very many sort of role model women in politics.
Koike also couldn't get the party support. Maybe it's not merely on like her gender, but I guess as far as I know, she also at least for the first time when she was chosen.
Come again? Koike
also like couldn't get the party support. She had to go independent.
Yeah, I don't know, she had a lot of inner struggle. I mean, she's been in different parties for the last 25 years. Many different parties, but the latest, or longest in the LDP, and I don't think she made enemies in the LDP, and she has some support. I don't know. She wants to be prime minister at the end, but she decided she would quit and go into the local election, Tokyo election, government election, and at that time the LDP opposed her. Yeah. Well, there are some who support her and some who oppose her. But now she has a very strong position to maybe launch into national politics. Anyway, as I say, who wants to go into politics, right? I mean, you have to be slightly psychotic to want to do politics, but especially for women. I don't know if you remember this case. This is also Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly. She was from Minanoto, so your party, and then she was like a first time as a politician, local politician, and she stood up and she was talking about how to improve or increase childcare in Tokyo. And then this man, supposed to be this man, he shouted at her. She said, "You should get married. Why don't you marry yourself? Why don't you make children yourself rather than worrying about other people?" I mean, outrageous sexism, right? And then all these other male councilors laughed. And apparently they had a recording of this session in the legislature, and they used special software to decode who had said what. So there was a moment they were talking about, which male council. Everybody denied that it was that. Anyway, there's a lot of these instances of sexism towards women. So Japan is very conservative. In the world of politics, it's even more conservative. Why would you want to go into that world? You have to be quite determined. Well, what could be done? Party gender quotas probably is a good thing. It's a very brutal kind of way of doing it, but if you have half politicians candidates have to be women, you get half of them automatically, and that should probably change attitudes. Interest groups and civil society should link more, feminists should link more to parties. They tend to shy away from getting involved in politics. And like on it, though, they have been very successful. There's a new NPO called Nihon Zenkoku Obachan Ko from Osaka. So this is Osaka Obachan. 死亡率より投票率ありました。Anyhow, saying this is increase the voting turnout, not your fat rate. So encouraging women of their age group or younger to get involved in politics and to make it clear that you need to participate if you want to change things. This is actually quite important. The fact that you have governors and mayors that are women, and they can serve as role models. So Koike, Chiji, Kada Yukiko, Shiga Prefecture. And the thing about governor and mayor elections is that it's just a one-shot deal. It's like you don't need to have tremendous party organization. If you're famous or celebrity and you have a strong message as photogenic, it's relatively easier to win. Far more difficult to win 300 electoral districts across Japan, but winning a governorship or mayorship is not as difficult. More governors and mayors that are women, and if they're successful, they do a good job, creates a role model. So Kada and Koike, I think, very good. Maybe they're stepping stones to the team of Prime Minister in Japan. Just general improvement of civics education and youth participation in politics. I think the level of interest and understanding in terms of democracy and politics in Japan, as far as I can tell, pretty low. So the more young people are involved, interested, men and women, it will change attitudes towards democracy. Right. So that's my share for today. Still a bit more time. 40 minutes. Does anybody have any questions about this? It was a lot of, not very settled. As I noticed while talking, a lot of the statistics I gave you, some of them say 40%, some of them 30%. They're sort of not consistent, which is the problem. But it's different ways of measuring. I'll try and fix that for next year. Any questions about women in the workplace? Any suggestions? Okay, good. Well, so next week we meet on Tuesday. There's an extra class. If you like to come, you can come. If you want, please bring your paper or draft or ideas for your paper if you like, and then we can discuss one-on-one. If there are many people, I'll do a lecture, but otherwise I'll help you with your paper. Send a draft if you like. The class on the 18th will be here in this classroom from 4:30. Okay, 4:30. So gogenme. Okay, and then we have regular class. The last class will be on the following Wednesday, on the next Wednesday at 1. Okay. Good. So before I let you go, everybody has the paper details and what to write and what to do. You know where to send it, where to send the article, the essay. Okay. Good. Well, we'll see you next week. 4:30 here, Tuesday, or otherwise Wednesday at the regular time.